You are standing somewhere ordinary, a kitchen, a hallway, a street corner you have never walked down before, and then it hits you. You have been here before. Not a vague feeling, a certainty. You know what happens next, but you haven't been here. You know that too. Two things are true inside your skull at the same time, and they cannot both be right. Most people call this a glitch, a hiccup, a little short circuit in the wiring, but the real answer is far stranger than a glitch, and it has almost nothing to do with memory failing. It has to do with memory working exactly as designed. Roughly 2 out of every 3 people alive have felt this. It arrives without warning. It lasts a few seconds, and then it evaporates, leaving behind a strange residue you can't quite describe to anyone else. The French called it déjà vu, already seen. The name is over 100 years old, coined by a philosopher named Émile Boirac in the late 1800s, and for most of that century, nobody had any real idea what was happening. They had theories, wild ones. Some said it was a memory of a past life bleeding through. Some said it was prophecy. Some said it was a tear in the fabric of time. The interesting part is not that these explanations were wrong. It is that they were all trying to solve the same puzzle, which is this. Why does your brain hand you a feeling of remembering when there is nothing there to remember? Think about what a memory actually is for a second. You probably imagine it as a recording, a file stored somewhere in your head that you open and play back. That is not what happens. Your brain does not store memories the way a camera stores footage. It stores fragments, shapes, angles, smells, the direction light was falling, the feeling in your chest. And every single time you recall something, your brain rebuilds it from those fragments, live, in the moment. Your memories are not retrieved. They are reconstructed, which means every memory you have is a performance, not a playback. And a performance can go wrong in ways a recording never could. Now here is the piece that changes everything. The feeling of familiarity is not part of the memory itself. It is a separate signal. Your brain generates it independently and then attaches it to whatever you are experiencing, like a label being slapped onto a jar. There is a region deep in your temporal lobe called the parahippocampal gyrus, and one of its jobs is to sit there quietly and ask a single question about everything you encounter. Have I seen this before? Yes or no? It answers fast, faster than conscious thought, and then it stamps the answer onto your experience before you have any say in it. So what happens when that stamp gets applied to something new? You get certainty without content. You feel the familiarity, hard, but when you reach for the actual memory, there is nothing there to grab. Your brain has told you this is old, and your conscious mind is frantically searching for the file that does not exist. That is déjà vu, not a memory error, a labeling error. In the 1950s, a neurosurgeon named Wilder Penfield was doing something that sounds almost unbelievable now. He was operating on the brains of conscious epilepsy patients, using a small electrode to stimulate different parts of the exposed cortex, asking them what they felt. The patients were awake the entire time. The brain itself feels no pain. And when Penfield touched certain spots in the temporal lobe, patients reported it. That feeling, the rush of having been here before. He could produce déjà vu on demand, with electricity, in a room where nothing familiar was happening at all. That was the first hard proof. This experience is not mystical, it is anatomical. There is a place in your head where it lives, and if you press it, it comes out. But knowing where it comes from does not tell you why it exists. Why would evolution build a system that hands you false certainty about your own past? Here is where it gets interesting. Researchers began noticing that déjà vu is not random in who it visits. It happens more in young people than old people. It peaks somewhere between 15 and 25 and then declines steadily for the rest of your life. It happens more when you are tired, more when you are stressed, more when you are traveling somewhere unfamiliar. Every one of those conditions has something in common. They are all situations where your brain is working hard to categorize new information. A psychologist named Anne Cleary at Colorado State University ran a series of experiments that got closer to the mechanism than anyone had before. She built virtual environments, simple three-dimensional rooms and courtyards that people could walk through. Then she built second environments that were completely different in content, but identical in spatial layout. Same arrangement of walls, same corner angles, same distances, entirely different objects and colors and themes. People walked through the first, later they walked through the second, and a significant number of them reported déjà vu. They had never seen that room, but they had seen that shape. Their brains had recognized the geometry correctly and fired the familiarity signal. The problem was that the recognition happened below the level of conscious access. They could not point to what was familiar because the familiar thing was an abstract spatial pattern, not an object they could name. So the feeling arrived with nothing attached to it. Do you see what that means? Déjà vu is not your memory malfunctioning. It is your memory succeeding at a task so subtle that your conscious mind cannot follow along. Somewhere in your history, you stood in a room with that exact arrangement of angles. A hotel lobby, a relative's house when you were 4, a building you walked past once. Your brain filed the shape, not the scene. And years later, standing somewhere new, that shape came back and the alarm went off. The familiarity was real. The location was wrong. Now think about why a brain would be built this way. Why prioritize shape over content at all? Your ancestors did not navigate by street names. They navigated by terrain, the shape of a valley, the angle of a ridge against the sky, the specific way a river bent. Getting that right meant finding water again, finding the camp again, finding the way back before dark. Getting it wrong meant not coming back. So the system that recognizes spatial patterns had to be fast. And it had to be aggressive. It had to fire on partial matches because waiting for a perfect match meant waiting too long. A brain that says, this looks like the valley we came through, and is occasionally wrong, beats a brain that says nothing until it is certain. False positives cost you a moment of confusion. False negatives cost you everything. Déjà vu is the cost of a system tuned to never miss. There is another layer to this, and it comes from the study of epilepsy. In some forms of temporal lobe epilepsy, déjà vu is not an occasional oddity. It is a symptom. Patients experience it as an aura, a warning that arrives seconds before a seizure begins, sometimes dozens of times a day. The neurologist John Hewlings Jackson documented this in the 19th century, describing patients who felt intense, overwhelming familiarity right before losing consciousness. He called them dreamy states. What that tells you is that the familiarity signal can be triggered by pure electrical noise. No pattern matching required, just neurons firing in the wrong order in the right place. The signal goes out, your consciousness receives it, and you feel like you have lived this second before. Because the machinery that produces that feeling does not care where the trigger came from. Your sense of having a past is a signal. Signals can be forged. And here is the part that should genuinely unsettle you a little. You never actually experience the present moment. Light takes time to reach your eyes. Sound takes time to reach your ears. Your brain takes time to process both, and different senses arrive at different speeds, so it has to hold everything in a buffer and stitch it together into something coherent before handing it to you. By the time you experience now, it is already about 80 milliseconds old. You are always watching a slight replay. Your entire conscious life is a reconstruction assembled a fraction of a second after the fact, which means the difference between experiencing something and remembering something is much smaller than it feels. They run on overlapping machinery. They use the same fragments. Déjà vu may simply be the seam showing, the moment where the two processes overlap just enough that you catch a glimpse of your own brain doing the work. For a few seconds, the illusion of seamless real-time experience cracks, and you see that the present and the past are built in the same factory, from the same parts, by the same hands. Then it closes, and you go back to believing you are watching the world directly. Notice something about how déjà vu feels compared to a normal memory. When you remember your childhood home, the feeling is warm, slow, tinged with distance. When déjà vu hits, the feeling is sharp and urgent and slightly wrong. There is an edge of alarm to it. That edge is your brain flagging a conflict. One system is reporting familiar. Another system is reporting new. Neither will back down. Your prefrontal cortex, the part that checks your beliefs against reality, is running an error check in real time and finding a contradiction it cannot resolve. Some researchers argue this is exactly why deja vu declines with age. Not because your memory gets worse, but because your error checking gets quieter. Young brains are aggressive fact checkers, constantly auditing their own signals. That auditing is what makes the contradiction feel so loud. The strangeness of deja vu is not the failure. The strangeness is the sound of your brain catching itself, which reframes the whole experience. That unsettling few seconds is not evidence that something is broken in you. It is evidence that a very old, very fast pattern recognition system is running underneath your thoughts at all times, comparing everything you see against everything you have ever seen, and occasionally raising its hand. It is usually right. You just never notice, because when it is right, the memory comes with it, and the whole thing feels ordinary. You only notice the times it reaches for something and comes back with empty hands. So the next time it happens, and it will happen, you might resist the urge to call it a glitch. What you are feeling is 100,000 years of navigation instinct, still scanning, still comparing, still trying to keep you from getting lost. It found something. It could not tell you what. You are standing somewhere ordinary, a kitchen, a hallway, a street corner you have never walked down before, and your brain, working perfectly, is quietly insisting that some part of this place is already yours.